Welcome back to Storytime with Captain Xavier. I'm Chaylo, and I play Captain Xavier, here on YouTube and in various other places. And where I started was in the Empire of Adria, and the story you voted to hear today by a landslide was the story of the First Holy War in Adria, which was the first war where I was hired as a mercenary in any reasonable capacity. The backstory behind the Holy War is really, in my opinion, the juicy meat of this story. In the Empire of Adria, they had what they referred to as the Church of Adria, which was how any religious aspect that you wanted to study or reenact or whatever was portrayed. So whether you wanted to play a Catholic priest character or a Reformation character, the gnome played a Cistercian nun, which was a Reformation Protestant church. If you were a pagan character, say a Viking or a Celter or what have you, and you wanted to portray a druid or some aspect of that, that was all done through the Church of Adria, which was non-denominational. And you could rank up in there in whatever, I have no idea how it actually worked, I never actually looked into it, but we did eventually have a bishop in the Church of Adria locally, and what they would tend to do was pomp and circumstance. They would do ceremonies, so they would do the coronations when you got crowned as Duke or Duchess or King or Emperor or whatever. They would also, at the beginning of battles, he would bless the battlefield, and it just added ambiance, and he had the whole thing with the mitre, and it was really, really cool. He started out as a simple monk and made it all the way to bishop. That was Guillaume Marchand de Fleur, Bishop Guillaume Marchand de Fleur, who was one of my favorite people in Adria, and I miss him as a friend. Just so haven't been doing Adria in so long, I have no idea where he is anymore. But there was also another church in Adria known as the Church of St. Warhammer. And the story behind that is Sir Warhammer was king of somewhere, probably Umbria, and got into a spat with a priest in the Church of Adria over something. And this was all in good fun and in good humor and all part of the game, and declared that the Church of Adria was hereby banished from his kingdom, which he couldn't actually do. But it, again, was all in character. And as a result, the church had him excommunicated. And he declared that since he'd been excommunicated and was therefore dead to the church, he managed to perform what would qualify as miracles, and therefore got himself declared a saint, and thus formed the Church of St. Warhammer. The sole purpose of the Church of St. Warhammer was to make war on the Church of Adria. Now, the Church of Adria wasn't actually an entity that would usually go to war, but it made for a lot of fun. And apparently down in their area, anytime they had a war that they didn't have any other reason for, so if it wasn't like a crown war where people were vying for a crown, or a banner war, or if they were just having a war for the sake of having a war, the Church of Warhammer would then declare war on the Church of Adria. And because the crowns were expected to support the Church of Adria, and knights were expected to generally support the Church of Adria, Warhammer always got utterly and unquestionably trounced in these wars. Now, up in the north, we were still tiny and unknown. We were the largest region geographically. We had Washington, Idaho, eastern Montana. We were huge compared to the other kingdoms, which are bickering over, like, the city of San Francisco was two separate kingdoms. We had, a quarter of the country, and we had like 20 people. I think we were getting close to 25, I think, at that point. But we had one fellow who was a member of the Church of Adria, and he was extremely ambitious. I believe his name was Robin. And his goal was to one day become the Pope of the Church of Adria. And he had his 5-year plan all laid out. And step one was apparently driving out Warhammer from the Pacific Northwest, in the way that Patrick drove out the snakes from Ireland. And there was a battle nun of the Church of St. Warhammer up there, because she apparently, I think, played Warhammer, and so liked that whole thing, and so, yeah, they had the battle nun. And so he declared war on her, declaring that the site where we held our practices and most of our events was holy ground, and that a piece of the one true fleur-de-lis was underneath it, because the Church of Adria's symbol was a silver fleur-de-lis. And so yes, a piece of the one true fleur-de-lis was under the Latah County Fairgrounds, and therefore it was holy ground, and heretics like her should not be allowed in, and thus war. And originally it looked like Warhammer was going to get trounced, because again, the crown had to side with them, and the knights were expected to side with them, and the largest military group in the Pacific Northwest at the time, because I'd only been in the group for a couple of months, the crew wouldn't be formed for years, was a household known as Clan MacLean. They were a household of warrior Scots led by Alexander Christian, who was by far the best fighter in the group at the time. I still had no idea what I was doing. I was 18 and not a clue. And they had been hired by Robin to fight for him. And so there were a handful of people fighting for Warhammer, other people who didn't like the church or who liked the battle nun, whose name I cannot remember. And so they were going to get trounced. You know, the House Solstice, the royal house, or the Duke, or the, I don't think he was Duke yet, I think he was Viceroy still. But the ruling house, Clan MacLean was on their side. I think only the Viking household, that I cannot remember the name of either, led by Sir Eric, was supporting the Church of St. Warhammer. And I was in the middle at this point. I didn't have fealty to anybody. And so, being that I had always intended to be a mercenary, I put myself up for hire. And since at that time I wasn't the best fighter and I didn't have a great, even most of my own gear yet, it was very limited in how valuable I was as a mercenary. But they did know that I was a very good archer. And there was combat archery. But I didn't have my own arrows. I had my own bow, but I did not have my own arrows yet. And so I said, I will fight for whoever can get me the most arrows to use, because I really want to be an archer. And Warhammer said, we will give you a dozen arrows. So I fought for Warhammer. Then things got interesting, because MacLean switched sides. Because they had originally been offered goblets. Ceramic handmade goblets. The Duke was a potter and would make, or the crown, he wasn't Duke yet, but he made goblets, pottery goblets. And generally they were given out as prizes, or people would buy them and things like that. And so the Church of Adria, Sir Robin, had offered every member of Clan MacLean who fought for him a white goblet with a Crusader cross on it, because Alexander Christian was nominally a Crusader character. And then at the last minute, like we were getting ready to take the field, he let them know, I don't actually plan to do that. I can't afford that. You know, it was just supposed to be, you know, pomp and circumstance. And Warhammer said, we'll give you a shield. And Clan MacLean switched sides. Just like that. And as a result, the Church of Adria, for the first time since the Church of St. Warhammer was formed, was soundly beaten on the field of battle. It ended up being like 3 people to 12 or something. It was an absolute rout. The only people that were still on this side were the 2 members, I believe, of House Solstice that actually showed up, because most of the household, including the Duke, wasn't able to make it. And so they got well and thoroughly trounced. It was interesting. I think I killed half of them myself before the lines even closed, because I had a bow and I knew what I was doing. We then, I think, split up the sides evenly and had, I think it was like MacLean versus everyone or something. And at one point in that fight, it ended up coming down to me versus Alexander Christian. I'd killed everybody else, but I don't know if I don't think I even had a sword. I just had the bow. And so when it came down to just him and me, he had a shield and was too good with the shield for me to be able to hit him. And so I got taken out. I did get one hit on him in one of the fights. It pegged him right in the side, and it actually left a mark. His armor was a little light. Yeah, that was the first time I got hired, and it was just for equipment, loaning equipment. Later on, the crew would get hired in hundreds of dollars of like armor and weapons and stuff. But that was the beginning. That was when I first got hired as a mercenary and decided, yes, I want to do this. And then I really started getting heavy into getting more gear, getting my own arrows, my own sword, my own shield, siege equipment. So I had lots and lots of gear that I could offer, because I eventually had more weapons than anybody else and more variety of weapons than anybody else. And while I couldn't use them all myself, whichever side I fought for then had the advantage in weapons. They had javelins and throwing axes and slings and catapults and all of that, which then kicked off a massive arms race, which just went crazy and was so much fun. Yeah, and what was really cool about that the outcome was that, like I said, that was the first time Warhammer ever won against the Church of Adria. And so later that year, I think it was, the Imperial Estates meeting, the one that I tried to take hostage but didn't end up getting to, at the feast of that, Saint Warhammer called up, I think Anna was her name, called Anna up in court and personally thanked her in front of the Emperor and all of the kings and queens and all of the dukes and duchesses, and thanked her for being the first person to ever lead Warhammer to victory in the field of battle. And I believe he gave her his first sword, the sword that was used when he first got knighted. He was now a king, but he wasn't able to bring it with him because he flew there and didn't want to bring a sword on the plane. So I believe he ended up mailing her his first sword that he was knighted with. And that was the sort of thing that would occasionally happen in Adria that would remind you that this really was a cool organization full of silly people who were really here to play a game. The politics occasionally got really muddy and unpleasant and all of that, but when it really came down to it, we were playing a game, and occasionally you'd run into the right people who were actually there to play a game and have fun. And that was something that kind of got said to the crew years later after we were well established and were now well known throughout the Empire, was that people saw that we were playing the game as a game and having fun and really getting into it and enjoying it. And people would often tell us that we were playing the game they wished they were playing. And my response was always, well, why aren't you playing it? And I don't know. It was the politics that eventually kind of made us lose interest and kind of drift off into other hobbies. A bunch of us ended up, going back to the SCA, and I got mostly into Nerf at this point. I'd like to get back into it. I miss sword fighting. I haven't put on my full heavy armor in so long I can't even remember. But yeah, good times. Good times. Right, now, which story should I tell next time? I'm going to give you the option of the time that Sir Eric, the head of the Viking household that fought for Warhammer, defended my honor and taught me what it meant to be a knight in Adria, and very much changed my views on knighthood in Adria. Or we could talk about wars. I don't think I've talked about the first Scots raid. That was one of the most enjoyable wars that I think we ever had. Or the Second Holy War, which I don't remember most of. I'd have to think about that one. Anyway, those are your choices. Vote, link will be down in the description, and thank you for watching.